Brings us to our keynote speaker. I'm going to do a brief introduction here. I'm going to do a little read up here. Our keynote speaker, Randy Bell. Cree name is Asine Masqua Stonebear. Randal is the senior manager of the wellness at Enoch Cree Nation. Randal has held the strategic and operational management positions in Saskatchewan, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Alberta. He holds a Bachelor of Social Work, a Master's in Public Health, and is currently studying towards his PhD in Public Health at the University of Alberta. When he's not working or studying, Randal is on an adventure with his wife, Liv, and their daughter, Mackenzie, Piwapan. So folks, without further ado, I'd like to call up our keynote speaker for this evening. I'd like to call up Mr. Randal Bell. Randal, to the podium, please. I'll just take my papers out of there.
Thank you, Roger. I was talking with Samson earlier about how I had actually run for council in Montreal, and that would have been 1997, 98 maybe. And actually, Roger beat me by 13 votes. And I find myself thinking, I wonder if I would have as much white hair as him if I had won this thing. No, that's a hard job, and I'm glad I didn't win it. So I'd like to start out by thanking Iron Swing for getting us started, for getting our hearts going with this wonderful ceremony this evening. I'd like to thank Senator Nolan for getting us started in a good way. And I'd like to thank I never really had planned on this, but the post-secondary student support program. Where are you guys? Can you guys please stand up and give us a wave? Because these guys supported me for over 5 years, my undergraduate, and then another, for the last 2 years, they've been getting emails from me probably on a monthly basis. So I appreciate everything you do for not just me, but for all the other students of Montreal Lake Cree Nation. We definitely would not be successful without your support. I'm missing a clicker here. Steve? Oh, alrighty. So, with that, I guess let's go ahead and get started. So just looking at my slide deck here, I wanted to say to the students out there, you know, that you're all trailblazers, and I think what happens too often in Indian country is the trailblazers move on, and the trail grows over, and then the next generation can't really follow them because the trail has grown over. So it makes me smile to see the next generation of trailblazers here, the grade 12 grads. It's imperative that you guys meet the post-secondary graduates, that you listen to them and you learn from them as well. And just a quick word, thank you Eldon for inviting me here today, for Mary Stacy for inviting me as well. So, I want to talk about a quick word to our young people. I want to talk about transcendent purpose. We're going to talk a little bit about transcendent purpose and what that means. What is transcendent purpose? We'll talk a little bit about my path to transcendent purpose. Then we'll talk a bit about the Indigenous health crisis. Uh-oh. Oh, it's not turned on. There we go. Yeah. So we'll talk about how we need each and every one of you when we talk about Indigenous health, but when we talk about Indigenous communities in general. So here we go. So what is transcendent purpose? Has anybody ever heard of it? No? Well, without getting too deep into Abraham Maslow's philosophical realms of self-actualization and a whole bunch of other bullshit, having a transcendent purpose just means that you have found purpose in your life. You have identified a life goal that extends beyond your own experience. You want to serve something bigger than yourself. Maybe it's a cause. Maybe it's building something. Maybe it's teaching young people. Maybe you want to end homelessness. Maybe you want to end world hunger. Maybe you want to raise awareness of missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. Whatever it is something extremely important to you, and it's something that you're very passionate about. Does anybody know who this man is? That's Senator Murray Sinclair. Senator Sinclair is deeply passionate about Indigenous reconciliation in Canada. And he'll go down in the history books as one of the fathers of reconciliation in this country for all the good work he has done and continues to do for Indigenous reconciliation and Indigenous people. He is a man of purpose. So how will you find your transcendent purpose? How will you use the gifts, your gifts, to make the world a better place? What if you don't have a transcendent purpose yet? Well, I would say by being here today, you're well on your path to discovering your purpose. I'll say some of you may find your purpose faster than others. In fact, some of you may already know what your purpose is. You can feel it. You're drawn to it. For others, people like myself, we're slow learners. It's a process of trial and error. It took me years to find my transcendent purpose. I came from a very poor home, and we struggled with bills, we struggled with putting food on the table my entire childhood. Well into my teenage years and adulthood, I struggled with depression. I hated my life. All I ever wanted to do was to escape it, to run away from it, to run away from my community, to get educated, to run away, get a good job, and make good money, and to live a life of fun and adventure. So that's exactly what I did. I finished university and I ran away. I worked in the United States for 3 years. I lived in England for 2 years. Then I moved to New Zealand for almost 7 years. And for over 10 years, I lived the life I always wanted, a life of grand adventures. I scuba dived in Spain and Greece. I bungee jumped and skydived in New Zealand. I had experiences in the red light district of Amsterdam, Holland, that I won't mention. I paddled the canals of Copenhagen, Denmark. I explored old castles in Ireland, Scotland, England. Walked around famous landmarks like Stonehenge in England, the Roman Colosseum in Italy. I visited Mayan pyramids in South America. I've surfed some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. In Spain, Australia, Hawaii, Mexico, Jamaica, Greece. I rode camels in the deserts of the African coast. I rode elephants in the jungles of Thailand, cuddling with sleepy tigers. I've climbed mountains all over the world, explored cave systems, whitewater rafted. I ran races, marathons, mountain bikes. All told, I saw 23 different countries in 12 years. And as much fun as I had in those years, there was always something missing. No matter how much money I made or how far I traveled, there was always something missing. Whenever a trip was over and it was time to get back to work, I'd find myself drifting into that same depression that haunted me as a teenager. And it's like the saying goes, no matter how far you go, there you are. I began to hate my job. I wasn't passionate about it. I wasn't even interested in it. But slowly but surely, I fell into a deeper depression, which eventually forced me to go back to Canada. Once back in Canada, I learned very quickly that while I'd been running hospitals in New Zealand and chasing adventures in my spare time, the Indigenous people in Canada were suffering like never before. So I began immersing myself in Indigenous health. I wanted to learn everything I could about what was working, what was not working, and what was missing in Indigenous health services delivered to Indigenous people. And I discovered it wasn't simply a matter of poor health access on reserves. It was much, much bigger. It was racism, discrimination, lack of resources, lack of trauma-informed care. It was an Indigenous health crisis. But why is it an Indigenous health crisis? Well, simply put, Indigenous Canadians are dying a hell of a lot faster than non-Indigenous Canadians. As recent as 2018, the Indigenous infant mortality rate is twice as high as non-Indigenous Canadians. Indigenous male life expectancy is 8.9 years shorter than non-Indigenous males. Indigenous female life expectancy is 9.6 years shorter. In Alberta, Indigenous people had a life expectancy that was 12 years shorter than non-Indigenous Albertans in 2019. It made national news across the country. In 2021, that number has dropped to 18 years. We're dying 18 years faster than non-Indigenous people. The rates of diabetes, cancer, tuberculosis, heart disease, kidney disease, asthma, COPD, mental health, and suicide are all disproportionately higher in Indigenous populations. Now, some people are reluctant to call that a crisis or an Indigenous health crisis. But I don't know how anybody could look at a group of people living 10 to 18 years younger than the rest of the population and regard it as anything but. 120 years of colonial oppression, cultural genocide, has left many Indigenous families and communities stuck in these perpetuating cycles of trauma. The health professionals that are supposed to be helping Indigenous people for caring for them are in some cases the public service that Indigenous people are most afraid of. Statistics show that Indigenous people are accessing acute healthcare facilities like hospitals at increasingly higher rates. And they're accessing primary care like family doctors at lower rates. It tells us experts in the field that Indigenous people are only going to healthcare services when they absolutely have to. And so that means small, treatable health problems get neglected, they don't get treated, and they become chronic. And eventually we die younger. So what happened there? That's a sad little boy. Where was I? Are you going back? Sorry, folks, I skipped ahead of myself here. Sorry. So, anyways, all that to say that Indigenous health has become my transcendent purpose. Delivering health equity to Indigenous peoples and stopping this Indigenous health crisis has become my reason for being. The depression I once had about my career has been replaced with fiery passion, singular focus, and channeled rage. I'm here to tell you today that it's the most wonderful feeling in the world. Every morning I wake up with a full heart, and a focused mind. And when I go to work, I know I'm making a difference for Indigenous people. And when I look in that mirror, I'm proud of the man that's staring back at me. I will never work another day in my life again, because what I do is not work. It is why the Creator has put me here. It is my transcendent purpose. And that, my friends, is what it means to have transcendent purpose. I truly believe we're still very much a tribal people, and it's hidden in our DNA, but it's as real as the rivers and the rocks. I truly believe that we have to stand together if we're going to survive this health crisis, and if we're going to thrive as a people, as a nation. There's an African expression that describes this and says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Well, we have to go together. And we have to stand together now more than ever. So ask yourself, am I a storyteller, a good listener, an amazing artist, a good cook, an organizer, a problem solver? What are your gifts? How will you use your gifts to serve your people? How will you lift Indigenous people up to their rightful place in this country? How will you make the world a better place for Indigenous children? How will you care for your elders? Whatever your gifts might be and whatever power you might hold, it can be used to help Indigenous people, and it can help stop the cycles of trauma that are holding us back from being all we can be as a people. Because everything we do in the service of our community affects what we call the social determinants of health. So what are the social determinants of health? They are everything that makes or breaks a community. Housing, education, employment, income security, food security, community safety, health services, recreation. When we have good social determinants of health, we have good health. And when we have poor social determinants of health, we have bad health. Simple. So we need each and every one of these young people to lift up Indigenous people. In 2016, 44% of people in Indigenous communities lived in homes requiring major repairs, compared to only 6% of non-Indigenous people. Poor air quality, black mold contributing to higher rates of respiratory diseases like asthma or COPD. In 2016, 36% of people in Indigenous communities lived in crowded homes, compared to only 8% of non-Indigenous Canadians, contributing to an alarming rate of infectious diseases in Indigenous communities. We need trained carpenters, plumbers, electricians, people that can build houses and homes in our communities. We need safe and healthy homes to raise our families in. We need all of you. In 2016, 57% of First Nations adults 25 to 64 in Indigenous communities had completed high school or post-secondary education. That is lower than non-Indigenous Canadians for the same group at 89%. So we need educators, we need trained teachers, we need early childhood specialists, coaches, phys ed teachers, and daycare operators. We need all of you. Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada says that heart disease rates for Indigenous peoples are as much as 50% higher than non-Indigenous Canadians, and the death rate from stroke is twice as high. 2018, Indigenous rate of diabetes is almost 2 times higher than non-Indigenous Canadians. Indigenous rate of tuberculosis, 34 times higher. There are some Inuit communities where tuberculosis is 293 times higher than non-Indigenous Canadians. We need cardiologists, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dietitians, X-ray technicians, neurologists, infectious disease specialists. We need all of you. What about addictions and mental health? Every one of our families have been affected by addictions and mental health. Well, the rate of mental health hospitalization is 3 times higher in Indigenous populations than non-Indigenous populations. The rate of hospitalization for intentional self-harm, 7 times higher. The rate of completed suicide is 5 to 7 times higher. There are communities where the rate of suicide is 10 times the national average. There's an Indigenous community in Alberta that I work with that had 70 suicides in a 4-month period. A community of 15,000 people. Right now in Alberta, the rate of Indigenous opioid deaths is 7 times higher than non-Indigenous populations. And it's been that way for 3 years. We need social workers, addictions counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. We need all of you. There are now more Indigenous people incarcerated in Canada than there were black people incarcerated at the height of apartheid in Africa. There are more Indigenous children in foster care than were ever in care at the height of residential schools. Indigenous youth are one of the fastest growing segments of Canada's population, and they're top of the list for people most likely to die young. You are needed now more than ever. And if these statistics are shocking, they should be, because the need for highly trained Indigenous people is not going away. It's growing exponentially. It's growing in every community in Canada and every Indigenous community in this country. So wherever your path might take you, whatever your purpose might be, know and understand that your Indigenous community needs you. Indigenous people need you. And I promise you, finishing each day knowing that you helped an Indigenous kid with his math, that you put a roof over an elder's head, that you helped an Indigenous family get the services they need to support their family, is the greatest feeling on earth, and it's one you'll never get tired of. I'd like to close with a bit of a short story and a bit of advice for the new grads. When I had made up my mind that I was going to fully commit to a career in Indigenous health, I knew that I had to be in a position of higher authority. I knew that I had to be in a decision-making position, and I knew that that would take more education. So I decided to enroll in the U of A Masters of Public Health program. I'd missed the deadline though. So I found out which classes I was going to eventually need, and I enrolled in them as an open studies student. I passed all the classes, and then next fall, I applied for the School of Public Health. And before I sent that application, I remember thinking to myself, what if you're not smart enough? What if you're too old to keep up with the younger students? But I applied anyway. And a few weeks later, I got my letter from University of Alberta. So excited, I opened it, I ripped it open, and I was rejected. They get 1,200 applications each fall, and they only accept 90. And I wasn't going to be one of them. But I knew how hard it was going to be, so at first I was a bit relieved. Oh well, at least you tried. After about an hour, I became angry. This is my path. Who the hell are they to tell me that I can't be on this path, that I can't find this purpose? So I began an appeals process. I called every teacher that I had and said, I was rejected. Passed your class with a 96, but I'm still not good enough to be here. Well, they got more angry than I did. And within 48 hours, the University of Alberta reversed their decision and accepted me to the School of Public Health. So I started the MPH, the Masters of Public Health. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I kicked down the door. And not only did I finish it, I won the Alberta Graduate Excellence Scholarships 2 years in a row. That's never happened before. At graduation, thank you. Thank you. So, and at graduation, I got presented, this is just a couple weeks ago, I was presented with the auspicious School of Public Health Dean's Gold Medal. So, and if that wasn't enough, another 3 weeks go by and I get confirmation that I was accepted to the PhD program. So in a few short years, I will be Dr. Randal Bell. Thank you. But let's back up for a second. Well, actually, let's fast forward a few. So after I get confirmation that I'm going to be going to the PhD program, I apply for a job at Enoch, and I get it. And so now I'm going to be the senior manager in charge of wellness, and we're building a $40 million treatment facility there, and I have an annual operating budget of over $60 million. This is going to be huge. We're going to build something that Canada has never seen before. A treatment facility that is 100% Indigenous culture, Indigenous ceremony, elders, sweat lodges, and everything that goes with it. It's going to be incredible. But let's stop and think for a second. Had I accepted that rejection letter, had I listened to those voices in my head that I might not be smart enough, that maybe I couldn't do it, had I walked away without a fight, none of everything that I achieved this year would have been possible. I wouldn't have won the scholarships, I wouldn't have won the awards, I wouldn't have got accepted to the PhD programs, and I certainly wouldn't be building a $40 million treatment center. So I'm telling you this that because when you're finding your path, when you're finding your purpose, you will have challenges. You will be tested. It will be hard. But you can never give up. You might hear voices that say you can't do it, but you can never, ever listen to those voices, even if it's your own. Stay the course and be true to yourself. Be true to your people and find a life of service in Indigenous people. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you for your words there, Randal. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask Vice Chief Henderson, Councillors Eldon and Jeff to come on up to the podium, please. Jeff Badger, are you here? I'm going to ask our leaders to present the gift to one of our very own, our own band member. I'd like to, I'm going to turn it over to Eldon to come and say a few words. Eldon, it's on behalf of your colleagues. I don't know where Jeff went. Health break? Should have been listening to Randal. Yeah, no. Eldon, podium, please.
Thank you, Roger. That was very inspirational. I mean, well, to be honest, I got a chance to know Randal in the last maybe 72 hours or so, and our paths kind of aligned. And at no point did he say that he didn't have the time for his nation. And I knew he was busy. And Randal, we talked about his new role new job, and that he had to at least put some hours in before he went and spoke at a Grad in Prince Albert. And, right away there was some passion. I could recognize the passion and the commitment that he had when I offered him, an opportunity to come speak to our youth, speak to our grade 12 graduates, our post-secondary graduates. And I knew there was a positive message by this young scholar. That's what he is. And I believe that he's going to be drafting books, writing books in the future. That's part of the reconciliation path, the education reconciliation path that he's on. And he's demonstrated to us tonight that he's working for First Nations people, First Nations communities. And health is such a huge field across coast to coast, the three coasts of Canada. And in every First Nation across Canada, 600 and some bands in Canada. And one of the big bands that he's representing is Enoch. And they're advancing, and in the area of the health sector, we see some major progress there. And we could learn a few things from our band member, but he said, to me, Eldon, I'll be there, and I'll talk to my superiors. And just happened that Mary Stacy, our consultant, is very close friends with Enoch, and at no time did they hesitate to allow Randal to come and speak to us. And I truly believe that one day that Randal will come work for our nation. I just don't know when and how he's going to do it. But I can tell you one thing, urban services, we're trying to expand in different sectors, and one of the areas that I'm very focused on is health and education. And so those are two areas that I'm really focused on. And tonight kind of demonstrates that whole process of bringing back and welcoming back our band members that have been away for so long, and try reconnect them back to our community and our band members living in Little Red, Montreal Lake, off reserve, right? So we want to thank you, Randal, and on behalf of Chief and Council of Montreal Lake Cree Nation, we want to be able to share something with you. And I know your family's watching, and we have Dean, Vice Chief Dean, Jeff, and Joe. Thank you.
Just before Randal steps off the stage here, I just want to mention we had a grand opening of our new William Charles Health Center just last Friday, I believe. And we had a speaker, one of our former chiefs, mention it's time that we start talking about maybe building our own First Nations hospital. And I think that's something, with Randal, in that field, getting his PhD, and, those talks I think should begin. And I really would like to encourage some of our leaders and some of our decision makers that maybe it is time we start talking about our own First Nations hospital within the city of Prince Albert. So with that, again, Randal, I want to thank you for your attendance, and I want to thank you for your words this evening. And I know it's been a tough little while for you and your family, and this on behalf of my wife Val, our family, I just want to again thank you for coming back home. So hi, Naskaman.